Hello and welcome. It's Frances here. Thank you for coming back to my channel. If this is your first time here, I bid thee welcome. There is a subscribe button below if you would like to help support this channel by subscribing. Also a bell to be notified as to when I upload more content. I'm coming to you from Ghana country, and as such I acknowledge the Ghana people of the Adelaide Plains as being the traditional custodians of the lands upon which I reside. So yes, another video this week. Seems to be a lot. It's very unusual. But we are coming up to the solstice, so I thought I'd put together just a little video about the solstice. And the first thing that I noticed is that here in South Australia, we were coming up to the winter solstice, like everybody south of the equator. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it will be the summer solstice. But here in Adelaide in particular, the solstice will be taking place on the 21st of June, and it will be at 12 minutes past 12 p.m. So the first thing that sort of struck my mind was this repetition of ones, twos, and add them together in esoteric numerology, and they equal three. Three is a number of joy, coming together, of sort of community, of celebration, and quite, sort of ties in a little bit, I guess, to the theme of the winter solstice, especially within my own spiritual tradition, because we see it as the rebirth of the sun god. So if I have done a video, I think I have on the winter solstice, I'll link that below. But of course, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, that's not going to mean anything to you, because it's actually the time of basically the sun at its peak. So you may have heard the solstice now being called, instead of the summer solstice or winter solstice, around the tracks, people are now referring it to as the June solstice, also the Cancer solstice, to be more inclusive of everybody, regardless of where we are in the world. So this is basically because the sun has reached the Tropic of Cancer, which is a line of latitude approximately about 23.5 degrees north of the Earth's equator. And due to the wobble and the lean of the Earth, the North Pole is the closest point to the sun, hence why the Northern Hemisphere, you're in summer, and we in the Southern Hemisphere, we are in winter. And of course, in 6 months' time, as the Earth sort of wobbles on its axis, it goes around the sun, the reverse will happen. And the sun will then move down to, a little bit ironic because it's the Earth moving around the sun, but from our Earth-centric point of view, we see the sun moving down to its southernest point, which is the Tropic of Capricorn, which means, and again, that's 23.5 degrees south this time of the equator. And the South Pole will be closest to the sun, meaning us in the Southern Hemisphere will be bathing in the sun, while you in the Northern Hemisphere will go into the depths of winter. So as the Earth wobbles and tilts, there are 2 times each year when it's aligned exactly. And this is when, or what we call the equinoxes, because the sun is exactly on the equator. So we have equal daylight and equal night. And it is the sort of like dance between the sun and the earth, the sort of gentle ebb and flow that is very much tied in with the seasonal cycles. And all around the world, across time, our distant ancestors marked these times. Evidence of this can still be seen in some of the structures we see today, which often fill us with awe and wonder, because especially like the monoliths like Stonehenge, it's just like, how did they do that? Not only move these huge stones, but also align them almost perfectly to astrological or astronomical or cosmic happenings many, many miles above us. So we've got Stonehenge, we have a number of temples throughout Egypt and also South America and Central America. Newgrange in particular in Ireland, I know is aligned with the winter solstice there. There's actually a lentil box above the doorway that with the rise the rays of the rising sun at the winter solstice. The rays go through the little lintel box down the passageway and hit a stone that's engraved with symbols at the back of the passageway, and that ignites or lights up. Something very similar happens at, I think it's Cairn or Carnty in County Louth, which is aligned with the autumn equinox, and something very similar happens there, where there's a stone that you don't often, it's very hard to see the engravings on it until the sun rays actually hit it as well. And there's this sort of dance between the earth and the sun, this sort of cosmic dance that our ancient ancestors knew. The indigenous peoples of today still observe the sacred dance as well, and it's becoming to be more noticeable amongst sort of earth-centric spiritualities, also other more modern reconstructionists as well. And within my own spiritual tradition, we call these dates with the 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes, called them Sabbaths, which comes from, I think, from the French, which means to frolic, or it's marking a celebration. But they're more than just celebrations. They actually marker points. And excuse me, I was just going to choke. And the 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes actually mark the energy, so to speak, for the next 3 months. So here we are coming up to, say, the winter solstice where I live, and it's going to be marking the energies until we come up to the spring equinox, next 3 months. So if you're in the northern hemisphere, of course, it's going to be from summer solstice to the autumn equinox. Now, the word solstice comes from 2 Latin words. We've got sol, meaning sun, and sister, meaning standstill. And it is basically a time where the sun appears to stand still for a period of 3 days. It's actually rising at the same point, or if you're in the northern hemisphere, it reaches the same point, and it doesn't seem to like move higher or lower. Here in the southern hemisphere, it just comes over the horizon, and it seems to be at the same point. I said it's marking its northerly, or most northerly point in its journey in relation to the celestial equinox as well. So the highest point in the sky if you're in the northern hemisphere, and the lowest point in the sky for us in the south. And this standstill, or this pause that the sun undertakes in its journey, I think is rather important, because unlike the equinoxes, where we experience equal day and equal night as the sun crosses the equator, during the solstices, over this period of 3 days, as I just said, it's almost as if we can make a conscious effort to also pause for a moment, to go within with the sun, to reflect. And here at the June solstice, we're actually halfway through the year already. So it's the midpoint, and a lot has happened, especially recently. And as the sun's pausing in its journey, it gives us the opportunity to tap into that energy and breathe. Take a deep breath and actually just breathe, just be in the moment. This can be very beneficial due to the changes that are happening around us. Coming back to the heart, coming back to the body, coming back to our humanness, coming back to our compassion. All these elements that make us human. So over these next few days leading up to the solstice, if you can find 5 minutes, 2 minutes, even every day, to just pause, meditate, relax, reflect, focus on your breath before you move through the rest of the day. Okay, so I wanted to sort of mention a little bit about the astrology, because there's a few interesting things happen. The sun is conjunct with Jupiter, bringing in the sort of understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, as well as expanding our higher consciousness. And Sun and Jupiter are square to the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune, which is at 1 or 2 degrees of Aries. This is sort of like the 0 point. This is the start of the astrological wheel, basically. And this is something that a lot of astrologers are talking about. So according to Pam Gregory, this could be highlighting our sacred or our spiritual sovereignty, or maybe even coming back to our own spiritual leader or hero, as opposed to going externally. We are becoming our own leader. There's also the sort of sense of expanding our consciousness, our conscious awareness, and opening up, especially with Jupiter, with opening up to more possibilities, because the Sun and Jupiter conjunction is in Cancer. There are 4 planets at the 0 degree point, which is the world axis point. And I've just mentioned these 4 planets. So Saturn and Neptune at around 0 degrees, which does extend either side, 2 degrees either side. So we're going up to 2 degrees of Aries, and it can go back into 28 degrees of Pisces. But both Saturn and Neptune are between 1 and 2 degrees of Aries. Also, the Sun and Jupiter fall within that 4 degree sort of strip in Cancer. And also Virgo. So Virgo, I think it's Virgo. And this is where qualities or events are actually being brought to the public stage. Seeing a lot of things coming up being exposed. Saturn is connected with our integrity and morality. So if a person who's in the public eye has not acted with a good moral compass, so to speak, this will be highlighted. Likewise, with Neptune, which is connected with deception, this will be highlighted. Then we have Jupiter, which is connected with generosity and wisdom, and this could be made public. However, also got to keep in mind that Jupiter is also connected to, it makes everything sort of abundant and expansive, so it's connected with over-exaggerations, excessiveness. If people have a tendency of being over the top, they will be. Now, coming back to the Sun and Jupiter, excuse me, they are in what is called a yod in astrology. I think it's yod, which is about 150 degrees. It's also called like finger of God or a finger of fate. So they are in a yod with Pluto and Mars. And this figuration basically consists of 2 quincunxes and can indicate tension, or there's a tension point where challenges, or something that challenges that energy that really needs to be integrated and channeled by those other 2 points. So it's almost like a V shape. And the focal point is the apex. And we've got one apex with the Sun and Jupiter and Mars being Pluto. And, excuse me, and then there's another yod where it's between Saturn and Neptune conjunction, and Pluto and Mars again, with Mars this time being the focal point. And that's quite interesting because Mars, as we know, is full of energy and also can be hot-headed. It can be aggressive. Mars is the Roman god of war. Ares is the Greek, Eris is the Greek god of war. Mars rules Aries, and this is the starting point where we've got Saturn and Neptune. And I don't want to make too much social commentary as to what's recently taken off in the world. So there's a bit of tension, which I think is an understatement, if I'm perfectly honest, happening. And another astrologer, Heather Ainsworth, points out that a further aspect relating to Mars is that its outer sign square with Uranus. And what all of this means is that during the June solstice, the winter solstice here in the southern hemisphere, the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere, Mars is going to be very prominent, as we're seeing. And it will be activated by the three outer transpersonal planets, which are Neptune, Pluto, and Saturn. So this first yod between Sun and Jupiter, Mars, and targeting down into Pluto is sort of showing us that we are moving into new beliefs. New beliefs is the Sun and Jupiter. And to bring it into action, which is Pluto, because Pluto is at 3 degrees of Aquarius, and Aquarius is all about transformation and healing. The second yod with Mars as the focal point includes Pluto, which is in a sextile with Saturn and Neptune conjunction in the early degrees of Aries, as I've been mentioning. So this is all about bringing into sort of play a new spiritual consciousness, bringing this into form, earthing it, which is the Saturn and Aries. So that gives us a little bit of hope. With Jupiter sort of holding the light of the sun, sort of indicates a time for a rebirth, which is perfect timing for very apt for us in the southern hemisphere, because the summer solstice is about the rebirth of the sun, our winter sun. However, globally, these cosmic energies could also be supporting this for everyone else as well. We're sort of merging or emerging into more or new possibilities of different ways of doing things, not to be caught up in all the distractions. There are new ways being offered to us, new ways of understanding, especially as to who we actually are and what our life is truly about during these sort of times of change. I also think it's a little bit of a reflection as to where I think our consciousness sits, our compassion, and the need to sort of expand that away from a narrow focus point of view, seeing things differently as well. And it's interesting to note that Mars is important in both these yods. And also Mars is conjunct to one of the royal stars, which is Regulus, one of the 4 bright stars, which are considered to be the guardians of the heavens, originating from ancient Persian astronomy. And they are usually associated with the beginning of each season. So technically we are sort of moving into the start of early spring, hard to believe. But interestingly enough, Regulus is the heart of the celestial lion, which is Leo, and as such is associated with the lion's power. And again, we're seeing sort of like power play being played out in the world. So the message of Mars conjunct Regulus is how do we come from our hearts with courage? We're seeing sort of a negative demonstration of power and courage. We need to sort of like come back, as I said, with compassion and to use that power, that self-empowerment more wisely. With Regulus being a royal star, especially the royal star of the north, it gives gifts or awareness or blessing that in relation to leadership. However, it's only when the strength and the power does not actually come from a place of abuse of power or revenge that this sort of divine leadership will take hold. For when the power is abused, it stems from revenge, the need of control, etc. This will actually cause a downfall. And again, this is something we are seeing being played out in some circles on the global stage. So this upcoming solstice is a very powerful time. It's a time of awakening, of transformation, translation, sort of enabling us to sort of open up more, especially to the energetics as to the next 3 months, as to where we are wanting to head into, sort of becoming more trusting as we go through this current chaos, knowing that we are actually supported by what's actually happening in the cosmos above us. So maybe sort of like focus a little bit more on the stars, coming back to the breath and focusing on our own little surrounds, as opposed to the distractions that are happening outside as well. We're also encouraged to integrate the sort of sacred duality within us. And this is the light and the dark, considering where we are on the earth, and there is the sort of duality between summer solstice, winter solstice. And there's sort of like life and death, death and life aspect, where here we've got light and dark and light, which is very similar to the Taoist yin-yang symbol, where one is never purely on its own. It always has an aspect of the other, because it cannot exist on its own. We basically need the two. And again, as I said, it's a good time at the solstice to just pause and consider the coming together and see how we can sort of tap into this creation of wholeness when we become more balanced. Solstice blessings upon you.